Today's episode is brought to you by Adorama. ADORAMADOTCOM now sells all manner of audio gear, including headphones, speakers, and amplifiers, in addition to the cameras and video products they are known for. Check out all their audiophile wares at ADORAMA.com. The occasional podcast.
Did you come up with that all on your own?
I look in the mirror and I practice religiously every morning.
In BC. Yeah.
Already a copyright infringement.
What?
We're only 3 seconds in.
Crap. Cut that out.
Oh, my. Today on the show, very special guest, Bryan Beasley.
Hey, everybody. I'm back.
He's back and full of...
When do I stop being the special guest and just become
Gotta earn your
co-host?
stripes, dude. You gotta earn your stripes.
I'm ready to make some money on this shit.
I'm thinking maybe season 4 or 5.
Nice.
So
right now, he's just paying me with deodorant. I don't know.
Believe me, it's worth every penny.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm just not fresh back from CES. I'll tell you what, it was a couple months ago, but this one was not recorded at CES, but set up at CES and recently recorded. So it has roots or origins.
It's fresh.
Its origin story starts at CES.
I like it.
Vitaliy of 64 years. That's who we have behind the mic today. I love that saying, behind the mic.
Yeah. It's a great interview. It's a good
the
catch.
Mic. The phrase though, the behind the mic. Also, I need to get your feedback on another thing.
Talk to me.
What do you think about the acronym TOP, the occasional podcast? Should I just rip it out, or is that like repulsive? Top. What if you could be like,
Top.
you're on top?
I don't know.
So,
All right, the interview. What'd you learn?
So he makes in-ear monitors, IEMs as they say.
Fantastic, too.
And I don't know, have you ever played on stage, Bees?
You know, I haven't. What is the evolution, actually? That's a great question. Because, that was like one of the big problems. The Beatles, they stopped playing live because they felt like they couldn't present the music like it was the way it needed to be. But they also couldn't hear themselves over the screaming girls. Like, have you ever listened to any of the Beatles when they were live in Shea Stadium? It's literally a soundtrack of screaming and then kind of a Beatles song. It's unheard of. But you, my friend... You've been up on stage opening for Blue Oyster Cult, if I'm not mistaken.
Back in the day.
So what is it like to have those in your monitors?
Well, I think as a singer, first and foremost, if you cannot hear yourself singing, it is absolutely horrible. As we saw from Adele at the Grammys, wonderful singer lady, but she started missing a couple of notes here and there. If you can't hear yourself, it's very hard. So anyways.
Didn't Mariah Carey on the New Year's Eve special... She couldn't hear herself either.
Where's my tea?
Where is my tea?
And what did she say? She said like...
No, that was it. Something like that. I can't go on without my tea.
And it was after the previous year where it was a disaster.
That's
on
where
top
she couldn't
of
hear
it.
herself. She literally was like, I can't hear myself. I'm a diva.
Yes. As the dress... No.
So now, as a guitarist, do you have an in-ear monitors?
Well, yeah. So ideally, you can have your instrument the loudest or whatever you sing. So singer would be the singer, but the guitarist can be like, oh, I can find... Because when you're on stage and you're using those wedges, it's just like a mishmash of sound waves. It can be whatever the mixing board gives it, but it's so hard to like really... It's the difference between having 10,000 watts shooting at you from a couple of monitors and having it very precisely tuned in your ear to exactly what you want is a friggin' miracle. It's like us beating Russia in the Olympics.
In the female hockey?
In female hockey. It was amazing, wasn't it?
Yeah. 1 a.m. I was up cheering, waking up my whole household, including my 3-year-old. Listen, he can sleep anytime. What? So yeah, when you're up on stage like that, first of all, did you you didn't have in-ear monitors when you were coming up and as a college band, right? Like when do you graduate to that kind of tech?
While performing, I never graduated to that. I got my first in-ear monitor when I started doing this.
Okay.
I was like, wow, I'm hit the big time.
It's like, wow, I can hear my guitar. I was out of tune the whole time.
Yeah. I mean, we had the wedges and all that, but it was, all I know is on stage, if the volume was too high, I've had like my skull rattle to the vibration of the singer hitting a note. Like, oh, the resonant frequency of my head.
See, I feel like you guys should have been have made better friends with Blue Oyster Cult backstage and asked if you could use their in-ear monitors. Although can you use each other's in-ear monitors?
Not generally.
Because they're fitted to your ear, right?
They're custom molded, yeah. They're custom molded devices, so it would. But side story on the Blue Oyster Cult, they were all not fresh, but they'd been out of rehab for a while.
Yeah.
And they weren't a whole lot of fun to hang out with.
Obviously I'm a photographer. We've talked about that before, and I shoot a lot of music. And I remember it was both who sings Freebird? I'm totally blanking. Leonard Skinner. Thank you, Leonard Skinner and Doobie Brothers. I mean, the word Doobie is literally in the title of their band.
No,
all sober.
No,
they're all grandparents too. So it was more of like a family reunion backstage with all these little kids running around and bottles of water. It was like, oh man, I missed the party.
I couldn't be more disappointed that somebody with the name Doobie Brothers, they don't even smoke doobies?
Nope, absolutely not. They are all stone cold sober.
That's
the reason why they can still tour. It's the reason why they're still around. Our band name would be Do Lots of Drugs.
the Do Lots of Drugs. We're the Doobie Brothers 2. Did you remember that SNL skit? Chris Farley at his prime, and they were like stoner people in a garage, the whole, like a big cast, and they were Chris Farley. They're all supposed to be stoned, and Chris Farley is like, "What's the name of our band?" And Chris Farley just looks right at the guy and goes, "Pearl Jam 2." I miss that man.
God, I do too.
So, like I was saying earlier, we met up with Vitaliy at CES, so just wanted to drop a couple of extra news items on there. So he speaks directly to their tubeless TIA technology coming to some of their headphones, so that's the news for them. But they also have the Nate N8 hybrid, so that's a dynamic driver and a BA driver. Hiya.
Finally.
Coming. For them, and then also I stopped by the Shure booth. They have some new cable updates that ended an MMCX connection, so you can actually swap out the cable for the earphones you already have for either like a Lightning connector or Bluetooth if you want to go that route. No aptX on the current model though, or you can have a 3.5 millimeter termination that does either the iPhone or Android with the flick of a switch. JH Audio got some new earplugs. They also have a self-help kit, which kind of lets you clean out your in-ears that we were talking about, because guess what? There's wax buildup in there.
Yikes.
And there's like a huge vacuum it's like a vacuum that sucks it out.
Really?
Yeah, it's for the stage hands to kind of get in there, and because they get plugged and one of the holes gets plugged, and then it's not sunshine and unicorns. And then, of course, check Bayer Dynamic, new $99 headphone, the DT240 Pro for production, partnered with the Fox, which is $149, and that is a USB microphone with headamp built in and a pop screen. So we might get one of those guys in one of these days, and then we'll do like a live demo on air. We'll do a A/B test. Everybody loves A/B tests. You like A/B tests, Bees?
Love them. It's about time, honestly. Who's going to win, A or B? Put your money down. And
as we slide into the 2-channel world, MyTech.
Great transition there.
The Liberty Deck for 1K came out. That's hot stuff. That was big news, Bees.
It was.
And the Clef Portable for $299. That's their portable piece that straps to a phone, does USB to a computer, tiny, but does DSD MQA for $300.
Boom. It's a great price point.
Macintosh has a ton of new stuff, most predominantly, of course, Audia and the XRT 2.1K for $130,000. But they sound phenomenal. I especially love the Audia by Sonus Faber under the Macintosh brand. Sonus Faber Audia Butte. Heard it in New York in a very sexy World of Macintosh building. Love it. But on top of that, everything's kind of getting refreshed for them. They have a new mono. They have a really cool integrated for around $3,000, but don't quote me on that. And a new CD player. So that's all the news I got, and boy, was that a lot. I think
Good. It's good tech news out there. Things are happening.
I'm glad you could wake up for the end of it.
I'm sorry. What are we? We're not on the air. You hit record.
Yeah, so a lot of fun stuff coming up, but it's a constant churn here. It's a constant churn.
It's always evolving. That's what I love. New technology. Can't stop it.
On with the show.
Let's do it.
Vitaliy of 64. Spit it, bees.
Here you go, boss.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We're here with Vitaliy and 64 Audio.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Brian.
So I guess we could just kick it off with when I first ran into your company, you guys were called 1964 Ears, and now it's 64 Audios. What kind of made you go for that change? What kind of signal to rebrand?
Well, honestly, it was a couple of things. One of the reasons we rebranded is we felt like 1964 Ears was going to kind of lock us into maybe only doing earphones. And so we felt like, I think it was in the beginning of 2015, we felt like we wanted to rebrand to something that was a little bit more wider in terms of the description of what we do. Also to the kind of prosumer and even some audiophiles, they don't really know what ears stands for unless they really do their research. And we also had plans to unveil other products and go down, diversify our portfolio. And we just felt like we wanted to keep the 64 because that's kind of our, that's the heart of sort of the soul of the brand. So we just went with 64 Audio versus 1964 Ears. So those are kind of some of the reasons.
It does 1964 have particular significance for you?
Well, no, it does, but not in the sense that I was born in 1964 or anything like that. Clearly, I'm too young for that. But what happened is, the story goes way back to where my brothers and I, we had a band, and although I was never officially in the band, I would always do production with him. I recorded albums with him. That's where I got my studio experience and mixing. Actually, even mixed a record for them, which was a blast. But one day, my brothers decided to launch a publishing company. Basically, they wanted to publish their own music, and that was kind of the thing in the, I would say, early 2000s, mid 2000s, is that everybody was doing their own publishing companies because bands were breaking away from the labels. And my brother came up with this name for their company called 1964 Records. And I guess that year just kind of spoke to him in the beginning, where 64, it was a vintage year. A lot of it has to do with the Fender, the Fender guitars. He was telling me, you got to get a 64 Strat or earlier. Those are the real, that's a real Fender guitar, the vintage stuff. And so when we started to kind of look into it more, that actually was a very monumental year in kind of pop music culture. You had the Beatles come to the States for the first time. I do believe the Rolling Stones kicked off as a band in 64, or got noticed in 64. And so the list kind of goes on, but those are some of the things that kind of to us defined that a new era in music was kind of kicked off. And 64 to us is kind of that monumental year.
It's interesting you say that, because I've interviewed quite a few people, and that particular very short time period comes up quite often as being an inspirational time, a creative time, and like a blank slate that was the blueprint, I think, for a lot of other music to come after it. So I find that very interesting that you guys share that same year. And I think it's something that resonates with a lot of people, especially 60s, all the way up until like the 70s there. It was at a very influential time, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, what's interesting, I didn't appreciate those recordings and that music until I kind of, really looked into it and started to kind of explore that era more. And I really love the sounds of the 60s and the 70s. That was, I believe that was the era of the vinyl and just things just had so much soul to them, and Motown and all that stuff. So anyways, I really love the sounds of that area, which reinforces it to me even more that that's kind of what inspires us.
And so let's talk a little bit more about the family band. I find this very interesting. I heard a rumor that you are one of 8 brothers. Is that correct?
I am.
Wow. Do you have sisters as well, or is it just brothers in the family?
No, not in the band. There were no sisters in the band, but I do have 4 more sisters. And so it is true that I have 11 siblings, and the band had 5 of us in it. Like I said, myself, I was never officially in the band, but I was basically producing them. I was doing sound. I was the tour manager to some degree. I was their production manager, and so I had to kind of know how to do everything and really help them to reach their dreams and that was a great time because of there was just so much learning going on, and I wasn't married back then, so I had a lot more freedom and would be able to go on these tours. And we had to make something out of nothing because we didn't have a label backing us. Everything was funded by ourselves, and I'm a keyboard player, and they never thought that their rock band. They thought that I would dilute their image being a keyboard player. They wanted those rocking guitars, and the band was called Sons of Day. There's still videos on YouTube and on other sites out there that still have the music videos. So it's kind of cool to go back to that from time to time.
So during this time period, how did you get inspired or start to really cut your chops with in-ear monitors? Because that is, pretty much the bread and butter, what started, 1964 years.
Yeah. So what happened is I think it was either 2002 or 2003, I bought my first pair of customs. I remember like yesterday when they came in, I got the package probably in the evening after I came back from work or wherever I was at. And I remember that I literally couldn't sleep that night because I was spending some quality time with these little gems that I would put into my ears. And, from that moment, I was hooked on the technology. Oddly enough, or interestingly enough, the first thing I wanted to do to those in-ears is cut them open. And I know I just paid like $700-800 for them, but I really wanted to find out what is this technology inside. I've never seen little speakers like that. They're little silver boxes producing sound, and I was fascinated from that moment on.
And I'm assuming you're talking about a pair of custom in-ears with balanced armature drivers, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, it was from now a competitor of ours, and it was actually they were silicone. So slightly different from what we're doing right now, but it was a dual balanced armature setup, and at the time, I hadn't heard anything better, so they sounded good, and I just the whole experience of being able to create a soundscape inside my head and not bother anybody with it was just amazing to me. I saw endless potential there.
So you guys kicked it off. Were you you're in Portland now? Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're technically in Vancouver, Washington, but it's the Portland metro area.
Vancouver, Washington. Is this in Vancouver, Washington? You're talking? Were you already in Vancouver during this time period, or are you somewhere else?
Well, here's the thing. I kind of hopped between Vancouver, Washington, and Portland, Oregon, because it's so close. And what happened is when I lived with my parents, this was during the band days. That was in Vancouver, Washington. Then when I got married, my wife worked for the University of Portland, and so we moved to Portland, which is literally 15 minutes away, just across the river. And then about, I think 3 years ago, we moved back to Washington and moved the business to Washington as well. So we were in both states, kind of, flip-flopping here and there.
I've visited Portland, but it seems like a wonderful little area. Is there any reason that you chose Washington to put your business there specifically? Is there any specific allure for businesses?
You mean over Portland?
Yes.
Yes, there are business incentives. One of them being is that Washington does not have a state income tax, which Oregon does. So basically, Oregon takes about 9 to 10% off of whatever you make just to the state, not even the federal government, but the state takes that. In Washington, you have sales tax, which is on goods that you purchase within the state, but you don't have any state income tax. So, potentially we're saving 9 to 10%. There's small taxes on the business, but they're nothing close to what Oregon charges. So yeah, there is an incentive.
Sounds to me like an incentive. That's a pretty big incentive in my book. But
yeah,
part of the whole balanced armature driver in the custom, in the universal, has been surrounded by this the number of drivers. Like you said, the first one that you got your hands on, I think that kind of started the whole thing, was one BA. Pardon me, maybe two BAs.
Yeah,
and now we've evolved. What was the first number that you produced? What was the first model that you produced out of that dissection that you kind of went into?
Well, oddly enough, the first one that I put together on my own was a 3-driver.
Okay.
And there's kind of a simple reason for that, is because when I started my company, the way that it got started, it was sort of slow, and I wasn't really planning to launch a business or anything. I was just messing around. And what had happened is I have a lot of musician friends around Portland here, and even back in Ukraine, which is where I'm from. They found out that I'm building in-ears, and so, as you know, friends don't let friends go without in-ears, and they would reach out to me and say, "Hey, can you build me a set next to nothing?" I'm like, "Okay, yeah, I guess I could do that. I'm doing this in my spare bedroom," and so I had, and so they all wanted the triple driver, and so I began building triple drivers, and then the other thing that pushed me to do triple drivers was there was a church down in California that, again, heard that I was doing this, and they put in an order of 10 sets. I remember, like yesterday, I got this check. I think it was for like $3,000 because it was $300 a pop. And, I'm supposed to produce these things in like 2 weeks. And so I was scrambling. But anyways, that was also for 3 drivers. And so kind of the triple driver was really kind of the sought after model. And so that's what I started with. And then I went back and did a dual. And then immediately, a few months into officially launching the business, I started working on the quad, and it just kind of went from there.
So were these all for custom molds?
Yes,
so
they
it was
were.
$300 for a custom mold. That's a pretty good price, I think. $300 for a custom mold. I think they probably still land around that area, but I mean, for the most part, they guys spend quite a bit more on those, as you know. So now let's just say, 300 is where you started. To give an example, what's your top model cost right now?
Well, in the custom line, our top one is $3,000 for the A18T. So yeah, it's what is that, a 10-fold increase?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's become, I think, for a lot of audiophiles, I can't speak to the pro side, and I think on the pro side too, budgets aren't always, when it comes to production, they're not always the very top of mind. Some people are budget conscious, but a lot of times, you're going on tour and artists just want the best, obviously, right? But I think for the audiophile crowd, they look at it like a item of luxury, and they want to spend a little bit more on it. It's a custom. I mean, you can get it universal too, but the custom pieces are like, this thing's for me. I'm going to spend up on me, So it's been interesting how high the IEM market has gone in such a short time, because I think it is a luxury good for a lot of guys. They look at it like, might as well go all the way.
Exactly. Yeah. Their mentality, I think, is that, if I want to invest that much money, an extra $300-400, we've seen, really doesn't. It's not that it doesn't matter, but they are willing to go the extra mile to have the best of the best, right? If I'm purchasing, I guess, an iPhone, I kind of don't want something that's midway. I want something that, that it's going to be, technologically at least, it's going to last me for at least a few years. So I don't have that buyer's remorse of why didn't I just add a little bit more and get the latest and greatest. So we've seen that trend, definitely.
So you don't have to answer this if you consider it proprietary, but I have piqued my head into a lot of conversations at different audio shows about what is the best-selling model. And some of the responses I've got have been very surprising, in that I've heard certain companies, the top-selling model is proportionately higher than you would expect. So in a sense of scale, usually you would expect the lowest priced IEM to sell the most volume, and then it would slowly scale up. Or rather, the volume would scale down as the price scales up. Do you find that to be true, or does your sales reflect more of like a top-heavy thing, kind of emphasizing this luxury goods thing in your mind?
No, that I guess it's still true for us as well. That the lower you go, the more you'll sell, and this is no secret. I mean, we talk about it at a trade show, like you mentioned. But our best seller, depending on which month it is, teeter-totters between the 3-driver and the 6-driver. So we think that there's something there in terms of people are for some reason. Obviously we can't know 100%, but we have a good hunch that the 3-driver. The reason why it's so popular is because the price versus performance is so good, right? Mm-hmm. Because it sits at, I think, about $699. And then the 6-driver, which is about $1199, is the some months it's actually the higher seller out of the highest seller out of the lineup. And so between those two, those are the top sellers for us, at least. What's interesting, the next jump up would be the 12-driver. So I'm not sure if there's any kind of reason or rhyme to it, but what happens is 3, 6, 12. Those are basically the numbers people like, and I find that very interesting myself. But I can't sit here and tell you that we sell a ton more A18s than we do of our 6-drivers. I think the price just really is the hurdle for a lot of people.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, because it's a big it's a big investment for a headphone. The market isn't quite, I think, as saturated with big people with a lot of disposable income, right? As the 2-channel market is, these guys, a lot of times it's 20 grand is where the loudspeakers start. Mm-hmm. I think IEMs, it's not quite there, and the application into the mainstream is so much closer, right, than it is with the 2-channel hi-fi guys, because some people just want, I want something better for my iPhone.
Yeah.
They were like, what's the next step for me after I buy these crappy $100 earbuds? I really like the idea. Let's make the sound better. And then they step into it. So hi-fi doesn't really have that connection, I feel like, directly. So, I can definitely see that kind of being the case then. for a lot of models.
Yeah, I think what's also a factor for us is that we are very heavy on the pro audio side of things, meaning for live performers, which some companies, we have competitors that are very heavy on the audiophile. They almost do nothing in the pro audio sector. And so I think that, that it's maybe not be an apples to apples comparison versus, a brand that is purely audiophile serving. Because I think that makes sense why the 3 and the 6 are the best sellers, because the bulk of our business, even though the audiophile sector is growing very rapidly for us, for years and years, the bulk of our business has been the pro audio side. So I think, to me, that makes sense.
Can you maybe elaborate on what you think, working with both sides of the coin like that, what do you think is the biggest difference or the biggest contrast between the way an audiophile thinks of sound and the way a pro guy thinks of sound, or gal?
Yeah. From what I've been able to gather is that the audiophile is always looking for, they're looking for a very high resolution, kind of transparent type of sound that, will reveal things in the recordings and, that will almost make it sound bigger than life. And there's also the aesthetic part of it too. The audiophile is going to take issue with, a little piece of foam missing off of the packaging or something like that. They're much more in tune with the product as a whole. Where the musician, what they're looking for is reliability. They're looking for good sound as well, don't get me wrong. But I think they don't pick it apart the way that an audiophile does. They're looking for that emotion. They want to, for the music that they're playing or listening to, just to move them. They're not necessarily dissecting it. What we found, though, is that, if you try to just stick to high resolution sound and try to, bring the best technology into both products, then usually there's not much disagreement between the two. What's cool about our product is we have these modules that you can alter the sound with. So the musician who's purchasing that same A18T, he can put the 20s in there and get that low end to where he wants it. And an audiophile could put the 18s in there. M15s, and, tame the bass to where they feel like it's more neutral and it makes the mids and the highs more revealing. So I think, that's kind of the uniqueness of our product is we have implemented a system which allows you to change the thing to a degree.
Mm-hmm. On the subject of frequency response, do you feel that there is... It's a two-parter. It's a two-part question, okay? The first is, do you feel like the audiophiles have a sound signature, a frequency response that they are drawn to that helps you sell your product? And if so, how does that differ from the pro side in terms of frequency response alone, everything else being the same?
Yes, I say that I think we've been able to observe, what they're seeking. And usually, like I said, it's a more, I don't want to call it analytical, but it's definitely more energy in the mid range. And, like I said, the bass has to be, it has to be there, but it cannot be overshadowing the rest of the, picture. I think it is to a degree kind of a more mid-focus sound with really clear extension in the top end. And so I think that's what our like forte, is kind of. It's been received pretty well because I think we kind of hit that flavor with the way we tuned it. So yeah, they do have a preference, and it cannot be, it cannot be bassy, which usually the musician doesn't mind, because again, they're looking for more emotion rather than listening to all the subtleties.
Interesting. That was actually going to be my next question was, have you found that some musicians or stage performers just prefer a ton of bass because they want to kind of feel it more while they're on stage? I guess that's what you just alluded to, correct?
Yeah, and I wouldn't describe it
sometimes
as,
that's the case.
I wouldn't describe it as a ton of bass. What I would say is that they're looking for a bolder sound. And when I say bolder, it's just something that has more weight to it, something that, like I said, will translate the pulse and kind of the emotion and the energy of what they're doing. So really, yeah, they are judging these things a little bit differently because of the environment that they're in is different than someone sitting at their desk behind a computer trying to be immersed in this orchestra recording. They're different applications. And so, you have to tailor it a little bit to each setting.
So switching gears just a little bit, at NAMM, there was a new earphone that you guys kind of unveiled that was called the N8 in partnership with a musician. I was just wondering if you could kind of maybe talk us through how that partnership came about.
Yeah, it was actually interesting because we actually didn't reach out to him. He reached out to us. And Nathan East is, if anybody's a musician or even people that, kind of like that smooth jazz and that kind of genre, you'll come across Nathan East. He's one of the, I believe, the founding members of a band called Fourplay, Four. He's a producer, a bass player, a singer, just a really well-rounded musician. And the way that the partnership came about is last year at NAMM, so 2017, a colleague of ours brought him over to our booth so he could listen to our products, and he's never heard 64, and so he was intrigued, and so he came over, he listened, and he kind of fell in love with what we were doing. And now this is a guy who typically doesn't wear in-ears, as far as I know. So it was humbling to us that he would even consider, using our product. And so what happened is we made him a set of our ears, and he, I think it was about a month later or so, came back and said, "Wow, I'm just really loving what I'm hearing here, and I just like what you guys are doing, and you seem like a company that I would like to partner with on a signature IM." And so we were kind of a little bit taken aback. We said, "Really? Wow, that's that's great. Let's explore this." And so in the process, we figured out that him being a bass player and liking that. And if you listen to their records, they're really warm and big and just really pleasant to listen to. And what we ended up doing is we ended up designing a hybrid model for him called the N8T. And what's funny about that, or interesting, depending on how you look at it, is if you read it, N8T just says Nate for Nathan East. So we call it the Nate. And, he loved it. And we worked with him to make sure that he loves the sound and the tuning is something that he can stand behind. And he's a great guy to work with, and was just super cool throughout the process. And so this is a first for us. I'm not sure if it's an industry first. Someone alerted me to something else that a company in the UK was doing, but certainly for us it's a first, and in the US I do believe it's a first collaboration for a signature IEM. And so it's going to be available coming here April 2nd. That's when it's actually going to be officially ready for order. So that's how that came about.
So you guys worked directly with him to voice it. So would you say that the IEM is a creation of sound that he optimized? It's like his favorite sound. Is that kind of how that voicing went?
Yeah, he would give us feedback. I mean, here's the thing. He already told us we're starting off in a really great place already. You know, my design team is me and another guy. Coincidentally, his name is Vitaliy as well. So we call ourselves Vitaliy Squared, and and so we both are responsible for the tuning. And you know, we've been developing our curve, right? There's a thing out there, and you probably heard about it. Harman came up with a curve. They did a census or a poll, I guess, of probably thousands and thousands of people, and they came up with a curve that was generally acceptable by everyone. And what's interesting is that we've been, you know, using that as a guidance in some ways, but also developing our own curve that we feel like, you know, sounds good and is natural and is representative of the recordings and all that stuff. So when we gave him that curve, we didn't have to do a whole lot. You know, we didn't have to massage it a whole lot to get the tuning that he was completely happy with. So yeah, it was easy to work with him. That's all I can say.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, actually, I am familiar with the curve. I actually went on a tour of their research facilities in California, Harman, and I saw how they kind of test it out and do the research there, and it's an incredible facility. They actually have the exact same room in like 5 different locations across the globe. So if you wanted to like test out a loudspeaker, you could send it to these rooms that they have, and it would sound exactly the same in that room as in the room that you were in if you were at one of the corporate buildings. I was just like, dude, that is pretty serious. And that's on top of all the anechoic chambers. They have the silent rooms to you know, test and measure these guys. So yeah, it's really cool and refreshing to see a company that's kind of, you know, putting in the work to do a lot of different research, which, you know, not everybody can afford to do, because these facilities were quite elaborate, I thought. They had double-blind testing for loudspeakers and the whole nine, so it's pretty fun inside there.
Yeah, I got to visit them as well, but they didn't let me into the rooms.
So one of the other questions I had was, one of the things that we talked about already that kind of developed is the idea that it's, you know, we started out with 2 and 3 drivers and 4 drivers and evolved into this thing. Do you personally feel that more drivers always sound better? Because we've seen some IMs that have bucked the trend in terms of going just for a ton of different drivers. I've seen some flagships come down a bit after they peaked. So for a long time, and this wasn't that long ago, really, the IMs, the best ones you get were 12, 16, and then maybe like a little bit around there. Then we saw kind of this trend of downward. Well, we have this other model. It doesn't have the maximum amount of drivers, but it has less. And now we're seeing, like what you were saying with the Nate, is hybrids with a dynamic drive in there. Do you feel that in most circumstances more drivers are better, or is it in the voicing? Where do you feel like the secret sauce is?
Well, I feel like the proof is in the pudding, and if you look at you know, our 2 flagships that we've released in the last year or two, so you have the U18T and the Forte, and the difference in drivers between them is what is that, about 12 drivers? I'm sorry, that's 14 driver difference between them. And so what I'm trying to say here is this, that more drivers doesn't automatically equal better sound. What it comes down to, I think, the reason why you're seeing that trend, and that's very true for us, is that, you know, if you kind of just follow what's been out there, when I say follow, I mean like technologically, if you, as a designer, if you're just kind of doing the same old and just sticking more drivers into the earphone and just putting the tubes on them, the dampers, the whole 9 yards, just kind of following the same recipe that's been used for decades, then you run into an issue of where more drivers don't give you better sound. In fact, they can actually degrade your sound if you don't know what you're doing, you're not careful about, impedances and all kinds of, factors that go into it. And so the reason why we did something like 4 drivers on the Forte is, as you know, it's a whole different approach. We took essentially kind of the same bass driver in terms of the balanced armature driver, but we modified it and we're using it in a way different application in terms of how it's able to deliver the sound and how it's positioned in the shell and all that stuff. And so, a lot of people will argue that, the Forte is one of the best sounding, not only in our lineups, but, even when put up against the competition. Now, that's, again, proving the fact that it is, you do have to start off with good sounding drivers, but perhaps what's even more important is how you use them, how you tune them, how you arrange them. And there's this thing that I call microacoustics, which is, you got the acoustics of the big open rooms, and those are well understood. But then you have these microacoustics that are inside an in-ear that are not very well understood. And so we're basically exploring those with these new products and the new technologies. So I would agree with you that you probably will see a trend of less drivers, but other technologies will come alongside that will enable for even better resolution of sound.
So from your experience, what do you think is the main benefit to more drivers? What does having more drivers either enable you to do, or is kind of opens the possibilities for?
Well, certainly headroom is the big benefit. Meaning, as if you go to a concert, right, you see the line array systems. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but a line array system is basically just a ton of speakers strung together. And so the reason why they do that is two reasons really. Is for coverage and it's for the SPL. And to get the headroom that you want, you need just like 24 boxes per side. Same thing here. When you miniaturize these speakers, the smaller you go, the less headroom they have. So then you have to then you multiply. You get many of them in there, and that's exactly what we did on our 18. 8 low drivers, 8 mid drivers, and then we went for 1 high mid and 1 high. And some people go, that's very odd configuration, but it's not odd if you know what each driver is doing and the physics of how they're contributing to the overall sound.
So one of the feature sets, I believe, on your top models is a idea of tubeless.
Right.
And I would love if you could explain what that means in terms of your IEMs and how it improves the sound, because I'm not familiar exactly with how that works.
Right. Okay. So so it's the TIA technology stands for tubeless in-ear audio, and the basic premise of it is that especially in high frequency drivers, putting a tube on that driver introduces 2 things: tube resonance and actually distortion because of that tube resonance. So as it's traveling down that tube, it's reflecting and refracting in all sorts of ways, and by the time you get to the end of it, the longer it is, the more basically damage you've done to the sound. Because you don't see that in speakers. You don't see tubes being placed on drivers anywhere except for hearing aids. Well, a hearing aid, no disrespect, but it's not the most high fidelity device out there. meaning they were never designed to be high fidelity. Hearing aids originated out of, just the necessity to hear the voice band, which is about 250 hertz to about 5 kilohertz. That's basically where they kind of drop off. And in fact, they digitally trim them to that so that you're not hearing all this extra information, for people with hearing impairment. So that's the technology that, that's been used for decades, like I said, to build in-ear monitors. Now, there have been driver improvements made to try to extend the top-end performance. And, you can measure out to 20K out of, tubed systems. But the problem is the sound is not linear. You have a lot of spikes and dips, and really they're very audible because our ear is very sensitive to that upper mid-range and the high frequencies. Yeah. And so what we discovered is, well, how can, actually in our quest to say, how can we get the sound to be more analog-like, to be more just rich without the peaks and the dips and the distortions of the high end. And so the solution came to let's completely get rid of the tube, and let's actually open the balanced armature up. When I say open, there's when you look at it, the tube actually is attached to the side of the balanced armature. The diaphragm is actually facing, I would say, at a 90 degree from where the tube is at. So the diaphragm's not even I guess, parallel to the tube. So it's like a little air pump, essentially. If you really boil it down, it's an air pump that's pumping air quick enough to create sound at the tip of the sound tube. Well, that we didn't like the way that sound was being generated. And so we opened up the balanced armature and we placed it right into the stem, literally as close as we physically can to the to the stem or the sound output of the earphone. And what that did is it extended the frequency response by about at least half an octave, maybe a little bit more. So usually we get start to get a drop off around 14K. I mean, we're getting extension past 20. So that brought the harmonics back, the subtleties of sound that kind of weren't there before. And the second thing that it did is it really made the high frequencies more even. So we no longer have this spike at around 10, which is kind of inherent with tubed systems. And, it really gives you a more analog type of sound, a warmer, more pleasant sound with richness that just wasn't there before. So that's basically our tubeless technology that helps us get this high resolution sound in the Forte and now in the rest of the products that are going to be unveiled here not unveiled, but literally launched April 2nd.
And this is more of like a technical question, but it's long been said that the human hearing range is 20 to 20, hertz to kilohertz. Do you think that the frequency ranges outside of that range still have an influence over what we hear, or if it's gone, it doesn't matter? To be honest with you, I haven't done enough testing to actually rule it one way or the other. My hunch is that there may be some kind of some effect going on past 20, but there's arguments on both sides, and I'd like to think that there is, but I have no proof. And so that's still something that I'd like to explore in the future. I just want to ask another question here, and you can choose to abstain or not. I think we talked about this a little bit at NAMM, but you're currently in interaction with a lawsuit with another company. Do you care to at all elaborate on that or tell your side of the story? What's going on?
Can I elaborate on it? I think the only thing that I can say, without really getting deep into it, is that we were accused of infringing on a patent. I think it's been about half a year ago, maybe a little bit more, that the patent office has ruled that patent to be invalid. And so we're in the process of kind of closing out that chapter of it. But there is another lawsuit that from the same company that is still, in motion, and it's still in the works. And our position is that we're innovators. That we've been accused of copying, but as our technologies show that TIA, Apex. Now we have lid technology that you probably not have heard about it, but anyway, it's a linear impedance design. So we've solved the problem of an in-ear sounding different on different sources, meaning there's no more frequency response swing, whether you go into something that's very low output impedance or go into some studio gear can be 30, 40 ohms output impedance. So we've solved that issue. So yeah, that's kind of as much as I can say is that I hope that people see that 64 Audio has its own technologies, and we actually do our own research. We don't piggyback on other people's inventions, and we're going to continue to do so because that's who we are. We're very passionate about what we do, and there's always going to be some opposition. Someone's not going to be happy with what we're doing. But, time will... I always say this to people, that time reveals all things. And so that's... I think that's definitely the case here. As time goes on, the truth will be revealed. And I know that we didn't do anything wrong. And so we're just waiting for that process to kind of to complete.
Is there anything else that you kind of wanted to talk about before we wrap this up?
Well, I just, again, maybe a shameless plug in terms of our TIA technology being implemented into the rest of our models. So basically starting at the 3 driver, going all the way up to the 8 driver, which is the NATE that we talked about. So essentially we're taking TIA and implementing it into our more affordable models. And it will start basically for $700. You can get the TIA technology in a custom. There will not be universals available, at least for the near future. But that's kind of the big thing that we got going on right now, is that we basically previewed them at NAMM and got some really good responses. And it's the next step for 64 Audio, definitely an improvement over the non-TIA products. And so that's kind of that's the thing that I wanted to throw out there is, anybody who's listening, that, check them out, be on the lookout for April 2nd release.
That's awesome. Thank you. And thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.